Today we'll showcase 12 people who survived the impossible. Individuals who found themselves in life-threatening situations yet clung to their will to live, emerging with incredible stories that sound like something out of a movie. Let's watch it. It's fascinating. Tsutomu Yamaguchi. On August 6, 1945, 29-year-old naval engineer Tsutomu Yamaguchi was preparing to leave Hiroshima after 3 months designing oil tankers for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. Eager to reunite with his wife, Hisako, and young son Katsutoshi, he was heading to his employer's shipyard when, at 8:15 a.m., his life changed forever. That morning, a B-29 bomber appeared in the sky, followed by the blinding flash and deafening roar of the first atomic bomb. Located less than 2.5 miles from ground zero, Tsutomu instinctively dove into a ditch. The explosion's force hurled him into the air like a leaf in a tornado, slamming him into a nearby potato field. Despite ruptured eardrums and burns across his body, he survived the atomic inferno. The following day, Tsutomu returned to his hometown, Nagasaki, determined to see his family. Wounded but resolute, he boarded a train, unaware that tragedy was about to strike again. On August 9th, the second atomic bomb detonated over Nagasaki. Miraculously, he survived once more, shielded by the mountainous terrain and a reinforced building where he had sought refuge. Though weakened by his injuries and fresh burns, Tsutomu made his way through the rubble, desperate to find his family. To his immense relief, he discovered that Hisako and Katsutoshi had taken shelter in a tunnel just before the bomb exploded. Unlike many victims of radiation exposure, Tsutomu not only survived both atomic blasts, but lived a relatively normal life afterward. After the war, he resumed his work as an engineer for Mitsubishi, had 2 more daughters, and carried on with unbreakable determination. In his later years, he became a vocal advocate for nuclear disarmament and passed away in 2010 at age 93, the only documented survivor of 2 atomic bombings. Violet Jessup. The Olympic-class ocean liners made history for all the wrong reasons. 2 of the ships sank, claiming thousands of lives. But did you know that 1 person survived both disasters? In 1911, Violet Jessup began working as a stewardess for the White Star Line and was assigned to the Olympic. However, the ship collided with the Royal Navy cruiser HMS Hawke and had to return to Belfast for repairs. While the Olympic was out of commission, Violet was reassigned to the Titanic and joined its ill-fated maiden voyage on April 12, 1912. At 11:40 p.m. on April 14th, she was preparing for bed when a jolt shook the ship. It had struck an iceberg. Tasked with helping passengers into lifeboats, Violet was handed a baby by an officer and ushered onto a lifeboat herself. For 3 freezing hours, she drifted in the icy North Atlantic until the Carpathia rescued the survivors. While aboard the rescue ship, someone abruptly took the baby from her arms, and she never discovered what became of the child. Despite the trauma, Violet returned to Southampton and continued her maritime career. 2 years later, during World War I, she joined the British Red Cross and was assigned to the HMHS Britannic, the Titanic's sister ship, now converted into a hospital vessel. On November 16, 1916, the Britannic struck a mine in the Aegean Sea. As the ship sank, Violet attempted to escape on a lifeboat, but it was sucked toward the propellers, which destroyed the boat in a horrifying scene. She jumped into the water, striking her head, but narrowly survived when a nearby ship rescued her. Incredibly, Violet had survived 2 shipwrecks in 4 years, earning her the nickname Unsinkable Violet. After the war, she continued working at sea but never experienced another sinking. She passed away in 1971 at age 83. Louis Zamperini. During high school, Louis Zamperini discovered a natural talent for running, quickly becoming the star athlete at Torrance High School. He went on to compete in the 1936 Berlin Olympics. 2 years later, while running for the University of Southern California, he broke the mile record with a time of 4 minutes, 8.3 seconds, a feat that remained unbeaten for 15 years. Louis's promising athletic career was cut short by World War II, which canceled the 1940 Olympics. Undeterred, he joined the U.S. Army Air Forces, serving as a bombardier. In May 1943, during a mission in the Pacific, his plane suffered mechanical failure and crashed into the ocean. Of the 11 crew members, only Louis and 2 others survived. What followed was an unimaginable ordeal. Stranded on a tiny raft in the vast ocean, they faced relentless shark attacks, starvation, and even enemy strafing runs. For 47 harrowing days, they subsisted on rainwater and the occasional bird they managed to catch. After drifting over 2,000 miles, they reached a Japanese-controlled island, only to be captured. Louis spent over 2 years in brutal Japanese prison camps, enduring inhumane treatment and constant torture. His most notorious tormentor was Sergeant Mutsuhiro Watanabe, one of history's most infamous war criminals. Despite the horrific abuse and extreme malnutrition, Louis's status as an Olympic athlete became a propaganda tool that likely spared him from execution. Declared dead by his government, Louis endured unimaginable suffering until the war ended in September 1945. When he finally returned home, he struggled with PTSD and alcoholism, nearly losing his marriage. A turning point came in 1949 when he attended a sermon by Reverend Billy Graham. Inspired, Louis embarked on a path of healing, ultimately reconciling with his wife, Cynthia, with whom he remained married for 54 years until her death. Louis's incredible journey of survival and redemption inspired countless people, cementing his legacy as a symbol of resilience. Roy Sullivan. Being a park ranger comes with risks, such as wild animal attacks or natural disasters. However, Roy Sullivan, who dedicated his life to working at Shenandoah National Park, never imagined he would become the victim of 7 lightning strikes between 1952 and 1977. The first strike hit him while he was on duty in a watchtower. That day, a massive storm rolled in, and out of nowhere, lightning struck his body, leaving a burn on his right leg. But this was just the beginning of his incredible story, which earned him the title of the Human Lightning Rod. For the next 27 years, everything seemed normal until July 1969, when he was driving along a mountain road. A lightning bolt entered through his car window and struck him directly on the head. Roy was knocked unconscious, but his truck kept rolling and miraculously stopped just short of a cliff. In 1970, he was relaxing in his yard when another lightning bolt hit a nearby transformer and, in a bizarre phenomenon, jumped to him, causing minor burns on his shoulder. But his ordeal didn't end there. Over the following years, he was struck by 2 more bolts. On June 5, 1976, he tried to escape a storm and even believed the lightning was following him. While running, he was struck again, injuring his ankle. His final encounter with lightning occurred on June 25, 1977, while he was fishing. A bolt hit his head, causing burns to his chest and abdomen. Miraculously, he survived yet again. Roy Sullivan's life was marked by incredible bad luck, earning him a place in the Guinness Book of World Records as the person struck by lightning the most times. Even so, these strikes didn't cause any severe health issues, and he passed away in 1983 at the age of 72. Vesna Vulovic, JAT Airways. Flight 367 took off from Stockholm en route to Belgrade, with a brief stopover in Copenhagen. What started as a routine and uneventful flight turned into a tragedy, with only 1 survivor. At 4:01 p.m., an explosion in the luggage compartment tore the plane apart mid-flight, sending it plummeting from 33,330 feet over Czechoslovakia. Of the 28 passengers and crew, only Vesna Vulovic, a young flight attendant, survived. How did she survive a fall from such a height when everyone else perished? The most widely accepted theory is almost unbelievable. A food cart trapped her in the rear of the plane, preventing her from being sucked into the void. The cart acted as an improvised seatbelt, protecting her from deadly decompression. Additionally, her low blood pressure caused her to faint quickly, saving her heart from the trauma that would have destroyed the organs of a conscious person. The tail section of the plane, where Vesna was, landed on a snowy slope that cushioned the impact. By a twist of fate, she was found in the wreckage by Bruno Honke, a former World War II combat medic, who provided first aid and kept her alive until rescue teams arrived. Although she survived the fall, she suffered severe injuries, including broken legs, a fractured pelvis, crushed ribs, spinal injuries, and a skull fracture that left her in a coma for a month. Against all odds, she recovered and returned to an office job at the airline. In a display of dark Serbian humor, she often joked about enjoying movies about plane crashes. Vesna lived a normal life until her death from heart failure at age 66. Aron Ralston. In April 2003, this adventurer faced one of the most extreme survival challenges ever recorded. While exploring Canyonlands National Park in Utah alone, an 800-pound boulder shifted and crushed his right arm, trapping him between the rock and the canyon wall. Trapped 100 feet deep in the canyon and more than 20 miles from the nearest road, Aron had no cell phone and hadn't told anyone about his plans to explore the area. He took stock of his supplies and found he had 2 burritos, a few candy bars, and a bottle of water. Barely enough to last a few days. As his supplies ran out, he resorted to drinking his own urine to stay alive. Realizing death was near, Aron recorded heartbreaking goodbye messages for his loved ones on his video camera. He even carved his own epitaph into the canyon wall, hoping someone would one day find his remains. But in the depths of despair, he had a dream that changed everything. In it, he saw himself alive, one-armed, surrounded by family. This epiphany gave him the courage to act. Instead of immediately cutting his arm, he broke the bones trapping him. With a dull 2-inch knife, he began the excruciating process of self-amputation. Over the course of an hour, he severed skin, muscle, tendons, and arteries, finally freeing himself. He improvised a tourniquet with his water bottle before rappelling 65 feet down a cliff and hiking 6 miles under the scorching sun, dehydrated and bleeding. Aron eventually encountered a Dutch family who gave him food, water, and alerted rescuers. By the time he reached the hospital, he had lost 25% of his blood but miraculously survived. Doctors later said cutting his arm earlier would have caused him to bleed out, while waiting longer would have meant certain death. Aron Ralston's story was immortalized in the movie 127 Hours starring James Franco. Today, he is a motivational speaker and father, fulfilling the vision that inspired his survival. Mauro Prosperi. The Marathon des Sables is one of the most extreme endurance races on Earth, a 6-day, 155-mile journey through the unforgiving Sahara Desert. Participants face scorching heat and treacherous terrain, but none endured its lethal challenges quite like Italian pentathlete Mauro Prosperi. During the race, a sandstorm engulfed the desert, forcing Mauro to stop and seek shelter for 8 hours. When the storm passed, he realized he was completely lost, with no idea where he was in the vast expanse. With only half a bottle of water left, he resorted to drinking his urine to survive. By the 3rd day, Mauro found an abandoned mosque, where he discovered a colony of sleeping bats. Desperate, he captured and ate several of them to sustain himself. When the hardships became unbearable, he attempted to end his life, but he lacked the strength to follow through. Amazingly, he summoned the willpower to keep moving. After 8 grueling days in the desert, Mauro stumbled upon an oasis and quenched his thirst. The next day, he was found by local shepherds who alerted rescuers. Remarkably, Mauro had wandered 181 miles off course. Though he had lost significant weight and suffered liver and eye damage, he refused to give up. In 2012, Mauro returned to the Marathon des Sables and successfully completed the race. Truman Duncan. In June 2006, railroad switchman Truman Duncan faced an unimaginable ordeal. While working, he accidentally fell beneath a moving train. For 20 agonizing seconds, he clung to a rail car, trying to run backward to escape. But the train's 20-ton steel wheels rolled over him. The impact was catastrophic, severing his legs, pelvis, and left kidney. Unbelievably, Truman remained conscious. With incredible clarity, he managed to call 911, calmly informing the operator that he had been cut in half. For 45 excruciating minutes, he lay on the tracks, bleeding profusely, yet determined to stay awake. Incredibly, he even called his family to say goodbye. Rescue teams finally arrived, and Truman endured 23 surgeries over 42 days. Despite the long and painful road to recovery, his body entered a survival mode that spared his vital organs from irreparable damage. After months of rehabilitation, Truman defied all odds and returned to work on the railroad, a testament to his resilience and willpower. Richard Norris Williams. From a very young age, Richard showed a natural talent for tennis, especially learning from his father Charles, who was a huge tennis enthusiast. In the spring of 1912, his life was about to take an unexpected turn. After being accepted to Harvard University, he boarded the Titanic with his father to cross the Atlantic. But on April 14th, the ship struck an iceberg and sank in less than 2 hours. Richard and his father fought for survival, staying aboard the ship almost until the very end. In the chaos, as they tried to reach a lifeboat, one of the Titanic's massive chimneys fell, crushing Charles in front of his son. Alone and with no one to help him, Richard made his way through the wreckage until he reached a lifeboat, where he spent several hours with the icy water up to his knees, enduring such brutal cold that his life was once again in danger. When the Carpathia arrived to rescue the survivors, his legs were so frozen that the doctors on board recommended amputation. However, Richard was so determined not to lose his tennis career that he refused the amputation. Instead, he decided to combat the extreme pain by walking every 2 hours on the ship's deck to restore circulation in his legs. Against all odds, his willpower saved him. And not only did he regain mobility, but he also won his first U.S. Open Mixed Doubles Championship later that same year. After surviving the most famous shipwreck in history, his sports career became a string of successes. Over the years, he won numerous championships, including the prestigious Davis Cup with Carl Baer, another Titanic survivor. And in 1920, he became the Wimbledon doubles champion, partnering with Chuck Garland. However, the after effects of the accident took their toll, and he often suffered pain during long matches. Despite the pain, in 1924, he participated in the Paris Olympics, achieving a memorable feat by winning the gold medal in mixed doubles with Hazel Whiteman. He also continued to play on winning teams in competitions like the Davis Cup until his retirement from tennis in 1934, exactly 22 years after the shipwreck that nearly cost him his life. Anatoly Bugorsky. In 1978, while working as a scientist at the Institute for High Energy Physics in Protvino, Russia, Anatoly Bugorsky experienced an event that defied all odds. On July 13th, while performing maintenance on the U-70 particle accelerator, his head accidentally entered the path of a proton beam, traveling at nearly the speed of light. The beam passed through his head, entering through the back of his skull and exiting through his nose. Anatoly described the impact as a flash brighter than 1,000 suns, but what followed defied all expectations. While doctors predicted imminent death, he survived a dose of radiation that would normally be lethal. However, the skin that came into contact with the beam peeled away, revealing burns that cut through his face, bones, and even his brain tissue. His face swelled severely, and the left side of his face became permanently paralyzed, with his left ear almost entirely useless. Despite all the injuries, his brain did not suffer significant damage, as the beam did not hit vital areas like the hippocampus or frontal lobe, which allowed the physicist to return to work at the institute, complete his PhD, and show no signs of mental decline. The most incredible part was that the side of his face that was impacted by the beam never developed wrinkles and remained frozen in time, while the rest of his face aged normally. Anna Bogenholm. In May 1999, this radiologist was skiing in the freezing Kjollen Mountains in Norway. Unfortunately, her adventure turned into a nightmare when she slid down a slope and fell headfirst through the ice into a frozen stream. Her friends tried to pull her out, but the ice was too thick, and Anna became trapped between rocks under a deadly layer of ice. As the cold enveloped her, she managed to find a small pocket of air under the water and fought with all her strength to stay conscious, hoping help would arrive in time. After 40 minutes of agony, her body gave out, and she stopped moving, seemingly defeated by the relentless cold. When the rescue team arrived, she had been underwater for 80 minutes. She was stiff, as cold as ice, her heart had stopped, and she wasn't breathing. Although clinically dead, the rescuers didn't give up and immediately began CPR. By the time she reached the emergency room, over 2.5 hours had passed since her fall, and her body temperature was a chilling 56.7 degrees Fahrenheit. The doctors were determined not to let her die, so they used an extracorporeal circulation machine to warm her blood, pumping it out of her body before slowly returning it. For hours, there were no signs of life, but the next day, nearly 24 hours after the accident, her heart started beating again, and she came back from what seemed like certain death. Though her recovery was long and nerve damage threatened her ability to walk again, Anna defied all odds. Since fully recovering, She has worked as a radiologist at the same hospital that brought her back to life. Hiroo Onoda. This Japanese man was drafted into the Imperial Army in 1942 and quickly received guerrilla combat training with one clear mission: to fight until the end without surrendering. In December 1944, when he was sent to the remote island of Lubang in the Philippines, his objective was to destroy the airfield and the port dock. But when the relentless advance of the U.S. forces quickly crushed the Japanese troops, Lieutenant Onoda, along with 3 companions named Yuichi Akatsu, Shoichi Shimada, and Kinshichi Kozuka, took refuge in the jungle, determined to continue the war from the shadows. On August 15, 1945, when Japan announced its surrender, Onoda dismissed the news as enemy propaganda. For him, the war had not ended. So the years went by, and his small platoon turned into a guerrilla combat machine, surviving on what nature provided, like bananas, coconuts, and rice stolen from local farms. When the Korean War broke out in 1950, he thought the planes flying over the island were part of a Japanese counteroffensive, and saw this as yet another reason to keep fighting. When it was discovered that several Japanese soldiers were still battling in the jungle, search parties tried to convince them to lay down their weapons by dropping leaflets with news of Japan's surrender. But Onoda remained firm in his belief that it was all an American trick. As the years passed, his companions began to fall one by one. Yuichi Akatsu surrendered in 1949, Shoichi Shimada was killed in 1954, and Kinshichi Kozuka died in a confrontation with the police in 1972. Left alone in the jungle, Lieutenant Onoda continued clinging to his mission as if time had stood still. In 1974, a Japanese explorer named Norio Suzuki found him. Thanks to his fascination with the story of the last Japanese soldier, he managed to contact Onoda, who still refused to believe the war was over. The only way to convince him was to bring his former commanding officer, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, to Lubang to order him to surrender. On March 9, 1974, after 29 years of continuous fighting, Lieutenant Onoda handed over his rifle and katana, putting an end to the war. Upon his return to Japan, he was welcomed as a hero and lived a peaceful life until his death in 2014 at the age of 91, leaving behind a legacy of loyalty and unwavering spirit as the last Japanese soldier who never surrendered to the enemy. Now tell me, do you know any other extreme survival stories? Leave your opinion in the comments. Here are 2 options that you'll surely love.